Well, a lot of people are always worried about when the boogeyman's coming. I know there's a lot of fear and anxiety out there, but they're not looking at some of the rackets that are going on in, I guess you call it the healthcare industry, and specifically I want to talk about hospice. Hospice is like it's supposed to be pain management for terminally ill people, just basically to keep them comfortable. And the concept behind it is good in concept, but in reality it's turned into a racket. Because what's going on is the corporations that run hospice, or these centers that care for these terminally ill patients, they're getting reimbursed by Medicare, and they're clobbering Medicare and just taking all the money out of the government as much as possible. Now, there is a lot of proof that there's a major racket going on here, and I'm actually, to tell you the truth, the medical industry pretty much disgusts me, because in theory and in ideology, the way it should be, it's such an honorable field, but in reality, it's such an evil field. It's like you got a lot of polite talking people talk, and they don't even always talk polite, but they act like they care for the patients, and a lot of it's all about money and selling drugs. So in the case of hospice, their mission is basically to keep the patient comfortable. So what they do is it's all about pain management and things like that, not even about finding a cure. But I could tell you one I knew about. It was actually a friend of a friend. They admitted him in this place. He had these problems, cancers or whatever. He was terminally ill. I forgot exactly what the problems were. They were drugging him up and all this kind of junk. And they finally put him off in this one place. I think it was like a hospice, but it was like a better hospice. It wasn't like one of those rip-off places to die. And it turned out he got well. And he got released from the place. And he lived to be 92 years old. He still had his whiskey every day. He always had like a little bit of whiskey every day. And he lived for many years thereafter. And it goes to show you what doctors don't know in some cases, It's like I can't knock doctors, but, I have to be very critical of this hospice thing, because what it's turned into is a big money racket that is being paid for by the government, which, of course, is the government's funds come from the U.S. taxpayer. Their incentive, actually, in these hospice long-term terminally ill care facilities is to keep the patients in there for a long time. And the way they get in there is they get screened by a couple doctors. But a couple doctors will say, "Oh yeah, this is like almost like saying, I'm just going to screen somebody and it's going to help me out to say, yeah, you're going to go into hospice." That's what they're doing. And actually, to keep it in hospice longer is under care longer is more profitable, because there's more cost involved up front when they first get somebody in, and there's more cost involved when somebody finally dies. So all that time in the middle is where the most profitability is. So there's like a long period of time they're trying to get more and more people into this hospice deal for anything there is, and they have a guaranteed paying customer with Medicare, because since 1983 Medicare started paying for hospice, and it's turned into basically these corporations are in cahoots with the government itself. I mean, I don't know how to put it, and I don't know what to do about it exactly, but one thing I want to point to is an experimental device, and I don't know if it's experimental because I think it actually has been used in medical research in actual hospitals back in the 30s and 40s, and it worked fantastic with even people that were hopeless and terminally ill, and that was the Lakowski multi-wave oscillator. And I'm going to point to a link that I talked about. It was the alternative, I don't know if you want to call it alternative, because actually it was used by medical professionals in major hospitals many years ago. But it passed their scrutiny. And you're talking about people that have a lot of education, that are in the medical field, and It got the results. It got the results. The other thing is with Medicare, the way they're paying out to the hospice, the payment rate is about 10% higher than the actual costs. So they got a nice billing rate out there too. It's very, very profitable for long-term terminally ill patients to be put in these large hospice facilities that are run by large corporations. Actually, the vast majority of the profits flow from the U.S. government and Medicare, which makes up an estimated almost 90% of all payments to hospices. So almost 90% of the money going to hospice, these large corporations, is coming directly from Medicare and the government. And what is it? How does a person actually get to hospice? It's like you have to have 2 doctors sign off that, hey, sometimes they don't even have to be face to face with the patient. They can just look at the records and say, eh. And what are they going to do? Say no? No? And every once in a while they get reviewed and all this type of stuff, but there's been a lot of cases now where people actually were supposedly going to die and they've been in hospice for so many years and they get released. But in the meantime, who pays for all that stuff, right? Who pays for all that stuff? So anyway, longer stays are very profitable. They get a lot of cost up front in the beginning when somebody first comes in, and they also have a lot of cost when a person dies. Now, also the other thing is there's a lot of aggressive marketing going on. And, they're trying to get people in there because it's very profitable. It's like, how would you like a business that the more people you get involved in it and the more customers you have, you're always going to get paid, and the payer, the one that's giving you the revenue, is the government itself. And you can pretty much jack up the charges a little bit more. And you don't really know exactly, there's no real oversight as to what it's really costing, to take care of these people. Because, you got to figure this too. I mean, even inside, the facility or whatever, the corporation that runs the facility that's taking care of terminally ill patients, supposedly, there's a lot of high-paid officers getting like $500,000 a year. There's doctors getting $250,000 a year, nurses getting $100,000 a year. People are making some serious salaries off of that, and that's all figured in the cost of what the profitability is. Plus, it is extremely profitable on top of paying all those fat salaries. So, actually, the whole problem is that a lot of times people are being admitted that aren't even terminally ill. And a lot of it's due to aggressive marketing. There's actual hospice entities out there, the entities that run these hospice facilities are actually, they are pushing, hey, come see us. If you have a patient, and there's always something going on financially. There's always something going on financially. Now, actually, what I think is, I know a person's not going to live forever. There's always going to be this problem. But I'm extremely curious is, I would love to see a test of that Lokowski multi-wave oscillator used in hospice facilities. Considering that people are terminally ill anyway, and the device does no harm, I'd be very curious as to what it could do for some of these older people that supposedly have these terminal illnesses. It's been known to do a lot of miracles, supposedly, from all the reports on the medical people back in the 30s and 40s that it was done on. And, it's been known to actually heal animals and everything else, too. So it's not just all in your mind. Highly curious, because one device could treat, a couple dozen people, on a daily basis. Correct? So, and I think a lot of people aren't familiar. Maybe they're watching this video saying, what the hell is the Lokowski multi-wave oscillator? But I'm going to link it to another video I did earlier about, it's one of the few things out there, I think, it's in the alternative medical, whatever, apparatuses, or whatever they talk about, that is actually legit. And the reason I'm thinking it's legit is because they used it in major hospitals back in the 30s and 40s. Until Georges Lakowski got hit by a limousine in New York City, then they pulled a device out of the hospital right after he got hit by a limousine. I think he was 72 years old. And that alone is very suspicious, very suspicious. But there should be. I think a lot of people should just be aware of what's going on at these facilities, and if they have people that are in their family, and they're talking about hospice, maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you just don't want to do that. This is a racket, and it's actually putting a major burden on the Medicare system. And when the government is running up all these debt and everything like that, and there's problems with the budgets, you got a bunch of parasites out there that call themselves medical professionals that are just putting these people in hospice facilities for profit. And it's disgusting, So I don't even want to talk about it too much because it actually is pissing me off, to tell you the truth. But, I just like to put this out here for to be aware that there's a major problem in this area. It's not being addressed anywhere on the major media. It's like pretty much 90% of all the money, the revenue these hospice entities get is from the Medicare system because the government pays for everything. And they aggressively market people to get into hospice, and they like to keep them in there a really long time because the time they're in there in the beginning is where it costs them money, and when they die it costs them money, but all the time they stay in the middle, it's very profitable. So it's a racket. And the only way people get in there is if you have a couple doctors go, oh yeah, they check off all the blocks, yeah, and then the person's in there. It's a bunch of bullshit. It reminds me of, I don't know what the hell it reminds me of, communism or something? I don't know, it's probably what the hell it is. If they wasn't paid for by the government, and the families actually had to pay for that, it wouldn't exist. It wouldn't exist. So, tell me, is not socialism a real evil? In a lot of ways it is. In a lot of ways it is.